Kurz auf Deutsch, herzlich willkommen zu dem Panel. Dieses Panel wird auf Englisch stattfinden. Also wenn die englische Sprache nicht so ihrs ist, es finden auch zwei parallele Panels auf Deutsch statt. So, welcome to all of you here in Leipzig and in the US and in Poland. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Wehler-Schöck and I'm the international editor at the German newspaper Tagesspiegel, and I'm very delighted to be here at this important conference, just days away from the German elections. And we will look with our international guests at the role of national and international networks in fighting for democracy and against extremism. And sadly, we're seeing democracy in decline and populism and extremism on the rise, not least because the so-called leader of the free world, the US president in the form of Donald Trump in his second term, has used the past few weeks to display extremely problematic and dangerous narratives going in the direction of annexation of territories, or, as we now see, negotiating about the future of Europe and especially Ukraine without their participation. So we want to look at the role that networks play in this, on the role also that businesses can play in this regard. And we, of course, want to focus on the role that businesses play in US politics in this administration, such as Elon Musk, who has now access with his companies to not only highly sensitive information, but is influencing political decision-making at an unprecedented scale. And you might say to this, well, business influence on US politics is nothing new. If you look at the gun lobbies or at pharma or oil interests, they've always played a role in US interests. But what makes this, of course, even more sensitive now is that Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, etc., are controlling information and are therefore shaping what many people around the globe consume when it comes to news and information, if you can even call it that. So one of the aspects that we will, of course, also discuss is the role that media can play in informing people and shaping societies. I'm very delighted to welcome four experts to this panel. We have Daniel Kinderman. He's a professor at the University of Delaware, and he's the director of European Studies and a professor of political science. He has a comparative approach in his studies, so we'll talk with him about the differences between the US and Europe, of course. And we have with us Julia Roig, that you can see now on the screen. She's the founder and chief network weaver. What an awesome title, Chief Network Weaver, at the Horizons Project in Washington, DC, or Baltimore. Where are you based, Julia?
I'm outside of Washington, D.C.
Okay, so, and we have Marek Tatala. He's the CEO of the Economic Freedom Foundation in Poland. And to my right here in person is Robert Tchaikovsky. He's an entrepreneur and CEO of what we in Germany call a hidden champion. But today he's with us in his capacity as a board member of the initiative Businesses or the Economy for an Open-Minded Saxony. So we'll have a brief discussion among the experts here, and then we will, of course, open up the debate for you to join in with your comments and questions, and we'll have a very interactive round here, hopefully. So, Julia, I wanted to start with you. The Horizon Project focuses on social justice and democracy in the US, and myself, as someone who is still slightly shell-shocked from J.D. Vance's speech at the Munich Security Conference this weekend, should we be worried about democracy in the US?
Thank you so much for the invitation to be with you today. And, We're struggling in the US, honestly, because I think we need to be very clear-eyed with the threats to democracy. And at the same time, we need to express messages of hope and agency and remind ourselves that this current administration is not acting upon a mandate that they project. The results of the election were actually quite close. We had a kind of third party, even though we're in our two-party system, so that it was not more than 50% of the electorate that voted for this administration. And so, because of our two-party system, we are in the situation that we are in with the Trump 2.0, as they say. And there is a clear project, a political project to dismantle the institutions of democracy and to consolidate power in a CEO executive. But what I would like to say is that I don't think that is where the majority of Americans want our country to go. There is resistance to this direction. And there is a very vibrant pro-democracy movement that is very diverse and that is organizing in new ways. And so we don't take for granted that we need to be working for this democracy across sectors. So this is why I'm so glad to be in a conversation with business leaders, because business, civil society, faith actors, we need to be coming together in new ways. We need to be organizing across sectors in order to stand up for our values and our democracy that we want. So I can say a lot more about the existential threat. And yes, it is a threat, but we are not without agency to be making a difference. And you have a lot of friends in the United States who care deeply about the relationship with Europe. And so I feel the need to express that in this forum.
Yeah, so a quick follow-up. You said that you have great hopes for the business community, but when we look at the richest men in the world, it seems they're now caving to the Trump administration, with Mark Zuckerberg, for example, rolling back fact-checking on his networks. What gives you hope that there will be significant resistance from the business community and not mere following of their interests?
Well, as you know, when we say business community, it's not a monolith. We're looking at the technology sector right now. We're looking at the power of Silicon Valley. Without a doubt, is very powerful and manages an incredible amount of wealth and has a particular ideology that they're forcing upon us right now with their techno-feudalism ideas of a CEO executive, as I mentioned. But the business sector in the United States is vast. It's not just the billionaires. There are millions of small business owners. There are all sorts of other actors in the business community of conscience. It is true that everyone is a little we're all surprised at how fast this agenda is moving. And so it's going to take a little bit of time for people to recalibrate their actions. And yet, quiet engagement is happening. And I think that we're going to see the power of local action, state-based action, where that is where the resistance and the business community will probably find the most agency right now, whether it's wins in Wisconsin and at different state levels, that will eventually percolate up. We need to fight what's happening within a branch of the Silicon Valley sector. But the business sector is quite diverse and is also concerned. And there are ways to engage, and we'll talk more about those specific ways.
Thank you. Daniel Kinderman, how strong is your faith in U.S. institutions still after the first weeks of the Trump administration, after he has declared that there will be no more elections and that he is basically above the law?
I'm extremely concerned, as just like Julia is, but to be totally honest, I'm not all that confident in the institutions of liberal democracy anywhere. This includes even places like Germany that have had very unique historical experiences that should, I think we're seeing a process of decline or perhaps gradual erosion or decay. The notion of representative democracy is political parties are in crisis. This system is not what it was in the past, and perhaps it no longer works as well as we would imagine it to work, right? So I think the system is truly in crisis. I have certainly not given up hope. And I think a lot of the things that this new government are doing are extremely unpopular, and that some of the business community who are just, caving into Trump will regret that, because they'll notice that it's not going to go very well. This is going to actually, a lot of things are going to blow up. And I think that then business leaders will regret having caved in to Trump so easily. I mean, that's my quick sense. But I think that I actually see a lot of similarities. The decline has been the situation is very serious in that this strategy of, flooding the zone with shit is, moving us towards, in the direction of Hungary, of Viktor Orban's Hungary, which is the plan of Project 2025, which is being followed. We are following Hungary's lead here in the United States. This plan is very cunning and effective, and it succeeded in Hungary, and it's going to do a lot of damage in the US, but, people are going to fight back. So, I don't think we can be confident in institutions as such. It's people who make politics work in institutions, of course, and we shouldn't put our faith in institutions per se. I would say anywhere, not in the U.S., but also not even in other countries, not even in Germany. I would say it's really, the agency within the institutions that matters more.
You mentioned that you could see the business community becoming more frustrated with Trump policies and showing more resistance. Could you be a little bit more specific? What could be a scenario of that happening?
Well, Trump doesn't listen to any advice from anyone, right? He's not listening to anyone at all, anywhere, right? So he's not. I don't know that Russell Vought, there are people in his inner circle that are clearly pulling the strings, but they are not people with very deep ties, I think, to the business community, apart from Elon Musk. And I think you can see that this agenda with tariffs is extremely unpopular in the American business community. They do not like it, but Trump doesn't care. He's doing it anyway, right? So I think he's doing what a small part of the American business community, that sort of an extreme segment want, rather than the broad business community as a whole. So I think we'll see this alliance really it's going to fray, or it's already falling apart, I think, a month into his administration, because I don't think he'll be able to deliver the kind of tax cuts or the other goodies that do provide business support everywhere, not just in the United States, but elsewhere. If you make conditions better for business, they like that. But I don't think he'll be able to deliver on that. So, we'll see.
Marek Totala, let me turn to you. You're from Poland, and Poland is currently seen as the ray of hope in Europe, where voters managed to turn Poland back on its path towards Europe after several years of the PiS government. Can you explain to us how this worked, and how if and how businesses played a role in this?
Thank you for inviting me for this event. And as you said, political changes happened in Poland last year. What is interesting is that our previous government, Law and Justice government, PiS party, was inspired by Viktor Orban, that was mentioned by Daniel, by Hungary. The leader of Law and Justice said many, many years ago that one day we will have Budapest in Warsaw. This was their dream, to copy this model. Unfortunately, after 8 years, this plan failed, because we observed a lot of attempts to capture various institutions, from judiciary, public media were 100% captured by the ruling party, constitutional court, and so on. So we had very serious challenges, and in the end, last year's elections led to political change with new government, a coalition of parties under leadership of Donald Tusk, former president of the European Union Council, which is trying to reverse some of these attacks on the rule of law, which is trying to increase this resistance in terms of strength of liberal democracy. Nevertheless, Law and Justice Party is still very strong. They, in the opinion polls, have around 30% of popularity. And actually, the government is losing popularity. You know, when you rule the country, there are many problems that you have to respond to, like, you know, inflation, security challenges, now the US policy that is targeting Europe and Ukraine. So situation is not easy, and it's not for sure that law and justice will not return to Polish authorities. What is also important, that you ask about the role of business, I can also give you a more detailed introduction of my organization. Economic Freedom Foundation was founded by Polish entrepreneur Arkadiusz Muś. He's a owner of big Polish company. He's at the top 10 list of Forbes Polish wealthiest people. His company Pressglass is big producer of glass that you can see in many buildings in Europe and even United States. In Manhattan, there are some buildings that is glass produced by Pressglass companies that is also present in Virginia. They have facility there. And he decided to create the foundation to somehow institutionalize his giving to other groups. And one part of his activities was rule of law. And he was not in a big crowd of people. I would say that initially, not so many people defended in Poland rule of law because courts were not working very well. They were inefficient. People had very bad image about the justice system. So, and also the level of awareness about why we need constitutional court that is independent of politicians was not so strong. So initially, 2016, 2017, the resistance was very, I would say, limited to NGOs, to think tanks, to some lawyers. And then it was increasing. We observed a lot of activities of civil society. And here what is important is unity. I think business was not so present then, but for example, in terms of NGOs, you could see protests organized by think tanks that can be associated to, you know, very left-wing, social democratic economic ideas, and groups like my previous employer, Civil Development Forum, very pro-free market, classical liberal, because our view was that, you know, we can argue about rate of taxation, you know, the role of the government in economy, but within the rule of law, within the system of independent judiciary. So institutions matter, and we can have different opinions on various issues, but we were united in this idea that judiciary should be independent from politicians.
So, Marek, would you say that the Polish case confirms what Daniel just said, that eventually problematic policies will lead to resistance from the business community because they strive when there is a reliable rule of law and a liberal economic course?
I think business community sometimes needs some extra motivation. Actually, I think formation of the foundation by our founder was kind of good example, good practice, that you can be active, you should not be afraid. And this is another issue. I think many business owners in Poland at some point were not so active in the rule of law area because they were afraid. And there are some reasons why they were afraid. One was that law and justice was very, I would say, aggressive in terms of using prosecution and justice system to fight with their political opponents. Nevertheless, or for example, abusing the temporary arrest, so they're putting people in temporary arrest, but without any like justice really in the court system. So the problem is that I can say that some businesses maybe they were not doing something bad or illegal, but they knew that they are, you know, sometimes not fully following the law. They are not doing maybe 100% fully ethical, but 90%. So they were not very bad, but they were not so great. And this is I think, important that if you know that everything in your, you know, tax books, in your documents, in your company is in fine, you are less afraid because you know if you have control, even in the system like dominated by law and justice, it's very hard for, you know, tax administration to fine you for something. So this was example of the company that Arkadiusz Muś created, and I experienced this as a CEO of the foundation because the accounting is run by them as well. They want everything to be 110% Correct. So if you do things like this in your business, you're less afraid to challenge politicians because this is, the way they can harm you. And another thing is that sometimes I think some business people were saying, oh, we are not involved in rule of law because it is political. And I think we should be clear that, many things in our lives are political, and if business people are not involved in some political topics, other people will, professional politicians will be involved, media will be involved, NGOs are involved. Like, we do a lot of political things in our life, and we should not be afraid of it, of being involved in maybe not politics, but policy. And this is the question of policy. What policy should we expect in Poland? So summing up, I think we experienced this, some growing activists of business community. And when we're approaching the elections, this activist was the strongest, also because there was hope that political system can be changed. And if I can make just one last comment about democracy in the US, because for Poland and countries in Central Eastern Europe, United States was always kind of, best practice. We should be like the United States in terms of institutional quality of the institutional system. We should be inspired by US justice system and so on. And then EU institutions were also kind of inspirations to do some reforms in Central and Eastern Europe. Then we joined the EU. It was the moment when, for the first time, not because of Donald Trump or anyone else, organizations like National Endowment of Democracy decided.
Okay, thank you, Marek. I will come to Robert. Okay. We'll come back to that's the role of Central Europe and the networks. But let me bring Robert into our discussion. Robert, you're an entrepreneur yourself. We've been talking about bringing the business community into politics or policy, as Marek suggested. Where would you see is the line? We see Elon Musk, a powerful entrepreneur, very much interfering in US politics. Where is the line between good and necessary activity in politics, and where is it too much?
Okay. If I may follow up first on the opening remarks, because I think there is something, I think the verbalization of things plays a very important role. You mentioned the decline of democracy. Maybe it's a too optimistic view, but I would say we're not there yet. There is no decline of democracy. There is, of course, the democracy is endangered. We see a lot of developments that definitely should alarm us and warn us, and we should take them seriously. But I still believe that the institutions, democracies in the different states that we're talking about. Hungary might be a different example, but Poland is, I think, a very good example. There has been a lot of attacks on different organizations. There have been a lot of attacks on the constitutional courts and other things, but the country and the voters, the electorate, managed to bring the country back. We know that it's still difficult. We have still the situation in Poland of the cohabitation. There is the president that is still, coming from the Peace Party. There will be elections in May. We will see what happens. But the case is not lost yet. And I think, and I really believe what Julia said, that the institutions in the country, and this is a question that Americans have to answer themselves. Are the institutions strong enough to withhold? Are the parties that Trump comes from, even though he was a Democrat, he changed the party, he's now a Republican, and using this, are the people elected by voters strong enough to withhold, strong enough to defend the democracy? Apart from that, honestly speaking, as far as we look around Europe, there's been no country where the constitution has been changed. There has been no abolishment of democratic structures. They are being maybe stretched, they are being used for different purposes. There are opportunistic ways of dealing with this, but it's far too early to say that the democracy is being lost and that we are in some kind of a defensive situation. We have to face it in a different way. We have to say we are strong, we believe in the strengths of the democracies in these countries, and we fight for them, and we put all our weight into defending what we believe is the right way of doing it. Maybe there is some changes necessary, maybe there's some adaptations, some reparations. We spoke about it this morning. There is definitely, we have to be also very critical with ourselves. We have to look at what's been going on, we have to look at what's been happening, and we have to analyze what are the reasons that those red catchers are basically able to turn a country around and are gaining support also in Europe in many things. And why has it been necessary for the last 20 years in France to defend constantly against the rising Rassemblement National? Yeah, and the democratic forces had to join together in order to defend the country against those right-wing elements. I think that there is a reason for it that is deeper below and that has not been touched upon. We have been always, dealing on the surface of it and not really going deep down. Now coming back to your question.
Yes, if I may just add.
Sorry, but I needed to say that.
Yeah,
because,
and
verbalization is a big issue here.
Optimism is very rare these days, but if you look at the number of people living in democracies worldwide, it's actually been in decline for the past couple of years. And I would also not share your optimism when it comes to Europe. We see extremely problematic developments in Hungary, also in Slovakia.
Yeah, but come on.
Who knows what will happen in Austria? And if you look at Meloni's course in Italy, that's also a lot of cause for concern. So I just wanted to add a bit of caution, but please.
But looking in the global perspective, Hungary is not the how do you call that? I mean, it's not one of the biggest countries, and Slovakia is also not the biggest country. Look at India. Look at the other countries. They are still far away, but they are developing. Look at the development. We will see what happens. But I mean, there are also really exciting things developing. When you look at Syria and whatever can become there, when you look at Lebanon and the possibilities offered there, we will see what happens in the Levante. It can become a big break in a total new development. So it's not only bad, and it's not only, we don't have to be too fatalistic about it. But coming back to the influence of business, I think it is very important. Honestly speaking, for me, it's a normal thing, and I think that we have become too politically correct over the last 10, 20 years, In the 50s, in the 60s, I think every businessman, every owner of a company had a very clear opinion, on what is right or what is wrong, what is his political position, and so on. And he was sharing this with everybody in his company, and everybody knew, what he stands for. Then, we started, no, this is not really possible, and we should watch out. And, maybe we hurt some feelings of somebody, electing in the AfD. I mean, come on. I mean, this is not, I think, and I've been very, very clear about this, and I verbalized it very clear as a CEO of a company. Everybody knew what I stand for. Everybody knew that I'm, heading this organization here, and I wasn't afraid to touch those issues. Not in the sense that I was influencing anybody on who is he voting for and what his, where he marks the cross in the end, but in telling him what is at stake, explaining him very clearly what the the election program of this of this party means, what direction it takes, and what it will cost, and what it will lead to. And I think, I mean, of course, you cannot always, access everybody, and you cannot convince everybody. But I think that those that are willing to think, those that are willing to consider, not only play an emotional game and being, I don't know, shaming themselves for something what happened, or being, afraid. I mean, we're talking about also here in Germany. I mean, of course, we see that this is a serious situation. We are definitely at crossroads, and I don't want to underestimate the importance of what's happening at the moment. But we are still doing everything from an extremely, globally, looking at that, at an extremely high position. This is in Germany you say Leiden auf hohem Niveau, And we have to be aware of this. And all those people that complain about this and this are still, travel every year twice to, I don't know, some southern countries and lie on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to put everything again a bit in the perspective, in a certain relativity of it, and fight for what we are really convinced. And I think there is no excuse for any business person to say, I engage in enlightening others, enlightening in the sense that talking to them, argumenting, and telling them what is going on, what the facts are, as long as it's for the right causes, and then you might ask, what are the right causes? But
and who defines
as long as it's not only for your own sake and for your own benefit and ruling the world, and it's not the idea, but it's for the sake of the people and the country and the prosperity of the people, because without prosperity, everything else will fall apart.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for your optimism. Julia, you mentioned previously that you see new forms of democratic activism in the US. Can you share some examples of this? In Germany, many people ask themselves, where are the big masses of protests against the Trump administration in the US? So maybe we don't see it yet. Maybe there is activism that is operating more on the sidelines. Can you share some examples?
Yeah, thank you. And I'd love to, I will definitely get to your question. And I just want to like highlight a couple of things that have been said. You know what, this concept of like having curiosity about why we have global trends of the right of these extremist movements and parties. And, you know, as was just said, you know, you're in a crossroads right now in Germany. We felt like we were in a crossroads last October and November, and we're on the other side of that crossroads now. So where do we combine an effort that is resisting, but also reparative of a broken society that is polarized, confused, hurting? Because, you know, democracy is, it's not just elections, as we know. There's liberal democracy. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in the rights and freedoms of people. And so the reason I wanted to mention that is that, you know, we do have to not only resist what's happening now with the current administration, we also need to find a way of calling in our fellow citizens into a vision of the future where we all belong. And right now they're being fed a diet of othering, of dehumanization, of being afraid of each other, of you know, this divide and rule tactics that we see so wielded all over the world very effectively. So, you know, Modi's kind of Hindu nationalism is an effective strategy of you know, ethnic and religious hierarchies. And we see the resurgence of a racialized hierarchy in the United States, quite honestly. And we can't say that this current manifestation of an authoritarian faction doesn't have racialized elements to it. This is really about going back to, you know, white supremacy, quite honestly. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that resistance to this is going to look different. And it's going to look different than it would in France. I was just, you know, colleagues have said like, oh my gosh, if the public sector was being attacked in the way that we are being attacked right now, Washington, DC is convulsing with how many public sector workers are being fired right now. If this was happening in France, the whole country would be shut down. We would have marches in the street. Okay, that we have a different culture here in the US, but we're also strategizing in different ways. Is the right thing to have mass mobilization and give the administration the excuse to bring out the National Guard to start demonizing kind of these radical left-wing folks? Perhaps the strategies are an engagement strategy, meaning these, and this is where the business community comes in. There are soft levers of influence. So, you know, when foreign assistance was frozen, all of a sudden we were not investing in development assistance around the world. There was a congressperson from Canada, our 51st state, God help us, from Kansas, who said the farmers in my state relied on U.S. development contracts to provide assistance. All of those contracts have had huge economic impacts on the constituencies. And so that Republican congressperson had the ear of the administration to say, well, at least could there be a waiver for, you know, the food assistance, the life-saving assistance that's being provided. Now, you know, the slash and burn, you know, sledgehammer tactics of the administration means that even if they wanted to say, oh, right, okay, a waiver for life-giving assistance, that's great, yes. The fact of the matter is there's no one to actually give the payments anymore. There's no one in the contracting office. They've all been fired. So I guess what I'm saying is the resistance is going to be quiet and loud. And there's actually research on this. If we're in the state of a declining democracy, not full authoritarian consolidation, then the right approach for different sectors of society, civil society, faith leaders, businesses, veterans, security forces, is an engagement strategy first, so that we continue to have like the connections and the levers of influence to the extent that we can, and then pressure campaigns. But it's not, it needs to be very like a scalpel, like where are the pressure campaigns that will make the most difference? And I think that we're organizing a lot with faith leaders right now, for example, but sometimes this is going to be quiet work. And I think that we need to trust that this is happening. There's mutual aid networks that are happening on the ground. So I could say a lot more about what it looks like. I would just not feed into the narrative that the resistance isn't happening if we don't see mass mobilizations and manifestations.
Mm-hmm. Julia, quick follow-up. I'm wondering, how can people be reached? It seemed that during the election campaign, a lot of people voted because of a gut feeling that the economy was bad, and they felt like Trump would make a difference, even though, I don't know, more than a dozen of economic Nobel Peace Prize winners said he will destroy the economy. With this resistance against the measures of the Trump administration, how can people be reached, given that the traditional media has been marginalized and social media is basically in control by people in the Trump camp?
Yeah, it's a different form of organizing. That we have a very rich tradition in the United States of neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community during the civil rights movement. Churches were organizing, they were bringing people in for trainings. There was strategic actions happening, very much at the community and local level and then the state level. And I think that we're going back to basics now, that we have to reach people not through some, mass media campaign. People are not making meaning of the world because of a sender-receiver model of like, we're going to package a message, we're going to deliver it to you, you're going to make sense of the world in a new way. We really need trusted messengers that are based in community organizing. And this is absolutely happening. There are networks, Indivisible, Move On, there are church networks, there's where people are gathering, and there's energy for that kind of relational infrastructure that we're building, so that people can really draw upon their neighbors and not necessarily be driven by some top-down movement that's being directed from Washington, D.C. or national organizers.
Daniel, turning to you, Hungary was mentioned as a case several times, and we've seen during the first Trump administration, Steve Bannon traveling all across the world to, back then, Bolsonaro's Brazil, for example, Sebastian Kurz in Austria, and Orbán in Hungary. You mentioned that the Trump administration has studied extremely carefully what Orbán has been doing in Hungary. How important are international networks when it comes to populist and extremist forces?
I mean, this is a great question. I'm no expert on this. I think that they're very smart. They are not stupid. It's like, I think the liberals make so many, the political establishment, also in Germany, but in the United States, has made so many mistakes. These people are very clever, right? So they're learning what works in other countries. Project 2025, which really is the blueprint for what Russell Vought is part of that, right? What the Trump government is doing, that is from Hungary, because they said this is a way to do serious damage, or partially deconsolidate or do some serious damage to a liberal democracy that should be safe from that. It's a part of the EU. So I think there's a lot of learning going on, and we need to up our game. We need to do a better job of learning. So us together here, this is hopefully going to be a step in the right direction, and we need to do much, much more. Because let's be honest, we need to get better. Social media is one thing I wanted to touch on here. It's not like everything is controlled top down. Elon Musk does not himself decide what everything is going to be on X. He doesn't. But the liberals or the establishment need to get better. I mean, why is it that the AfD is so good on social media? I mean, the liberals need to get, it needs to be funny. It needs to be sexy. It needs to be humorous, right? We can do this, right? I mean, Germany is a diverse country. So is the US. Both Germany and the US are diverse, and there has to be a way to show this and communicate this that's not boring like you're in school or mit dem erhobenen Zeigefinger. I mean, who wants that? Most people don't want that. They're like, I mean, I don't mean to use a bad word, but they're like, fuck you. I mean, I don't want to, I mean, you're not my teacher, right? So, I mean, we need to improve our game. And we need to, yeah. So there needs to be more learning on our side here, I'd say.
So we've spoken about the power that the US has, not only in terms of capacity, but also sort of a beacon of human rights and democracy in the past few decades. Who can fill these shoes if the US no longer stands for bringing democracy to countries worldwide? Who do you see stepping up?
So I have two responses there. One is the positive effect of this. Look, this is catastrophic. It's very, very bad. There's no question that it's awful, right? It's truly bad. Europe and the EU, right, will become more of an actor, have more agency, become more politically autonomous. All these good things, right? So Europe, and there is still a large opposition movement in the United States, many people who do not share Trump's authoritarian goals. To be honest, I think most Americans don't. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I don't think most Americans want this country to turn into a dictatorship or an autocracy. I think even people who voted for Trump, I think most of them don't want that. Some do, but most don't. So, and that's where the leadership needs to come from. It will not come, obviously, from the White House while Trump is in power, right? He won't be in power forever, but while he's in there with Musk, yeah, he won't, because he can't amend the Constitution. And that, I think the judiciary is there, and he cannot amend it. He will not. I mean, I think before that happens, there would be, a civil war or something like that. The Americans will not allow him to stay in office forever. I'm very confident of that. There will be an election in 2028, and someone else will be in office. But if it's J.D. Vance, things might not improve much, right? So we need to turn a fresh page then. That's my sense. Yeah.
Thanks, Marek. So the EU, Europe has been called into play a lot, not only on Ukraine and defense, but also as a new symbol for democracy and an international rules-based order. How confident are you feeling about cohesion among EU member states and about their ability to rally together and present a strong united force?
I think what happened in Hungary and later in Poland was an example that European Union is not so ready to this type of challenges in terms of institutional setting. EU is quite tough in terms of accession criteria. To enter the EU, you have to fulfill a lot of criteria, including institutional improvement. In Poland, we also had to do a lot of things related to changes in prosecution in the justice system. But then when you enter the club, EU is quite weak in enforcing the rules of the club because it doesn't have the tools. It cannot fine seriously country by financial payment. They cannot send EU police or Brussels police to Poland or Hungary or Budapest to do something. So I think this was important lessons for the EU, that we should have serious discussion that was initiated a few years ago about the institutional changes, so that when you enter the club, the rules can be enforced. And this is important. And I think it should be done or completed in Europe before another accession happens, because the countries that may join, and I don't think, we are not speaking about Ukraine, this is still very unlikely, and it will generate a lot of opposition inside the EU. But for example, Balkan countries, they are also still institutionally very weak. They may be able to fulfill the criteria, but then we can maybe experience similar episode to what happened to Hungary in one of these countries. So this is actually the lessons for the EU. And also, I think the EU business should be involved in this process, meaning showing that the business community that is very present in Brussels, they should not only work on the topics of regulations, which is of course important, but also on the quality of institutions. They should have stronger voice in this. And in Poland, the reason why business was concerned was, for example, a falling rate on investments. We experienced deterioration of investment rate to GDP in Poland in the last 8 years. And I think this was kind of concern, this legal instability, political instability, led to the situation where people were afraid of investing their money because this biggest deterioration was on the side of the private investments. So here, I think we should have some kind of the trigger for the EU business to be more involved, and maybe also be involved in support of some institutional strengthening. As I mentioned, a lot of institutions like National Democracy left Europe a few days ago because of Trump's decision. It is interesting because the last time they left our region was when we joined the EU. They said, oh, joining the EU is enough. The institutions now in Poland are fine. You completed the plan. We can leave. And then after the episodes of Hungary, of law and justice in Poland, they gradually returned to the region. And now another departure of this type of institutions. I think this is now the big role of Polish, Hungarian, but not related to Orban, German, other business people, to be more generous in their funding of NGOs, think tanks, groups that work on this institutional quality, and this may improve the situation.
Do you think that the business community could provide incentives for countries like Hungary to come back on a more European track, or prevent developments from deteriorating in Slovakia, for example?
I think in Hungary, the situation is much more complex than in Poland. In Poland, we had much stronger resistance of various public institutions. We had much more stronger civil society, a very strong private media that were not captured by the ruling party. I don't have a lot of optimism about Hungary at the moment. Like the level of deterioration of democracy there, of institutional capture, of also capture of a lot of business people. There are a lot of business people that are just in a club of Viktor Orban. One of the Hungarian scholars is calling Hungary kind of like the mafia state, where you have Viktor Orban and then everyone is either part of the mafia or is afraid of the mafia. So this is much more difficult, but here I think there is, for example, a more important role of the EU institutions. They should not sponsor by EU taxpayers' money some projects that are, not used to benefit Hungarian people, but are used for political purposes of Fidesz party. There should be much more stricter monitoring of how the EU taxpayers' money is spent in Hungary.
Thank you, Marek. And Robert, I think it's time for a little optimism again.
I don't know whether I can provide that.
Sometimes it takes a couple of years when developments happen in the US to spill over into Europe. Are you concerned that there will be an Elon Musk in Germany?
Well, the state of German, I don't know, internet investments, Silicon Valley style investment is rather limited for the moment, and so I don't think that anybody will have that amount of money to spend and influence that way the public opinion, and then provide Mr. Trump with deals he cannot refuse. Basically, I think this is pure business. But coming back maybe to what we have said before, I think two very interesting aspects that have been touched. I mean, one would be the role of the church in the US. I think this is a very exciting topic, because I understood that the evangelical side is very much in favor of Trump. But Julia has been reporting us that there is that this has been one of the centers, let's say, of opposition and public and neighborhood involvement. And it would be very interesting to learn about that, more about that, because I've never touched that issue. And I think the next thing, apart from the resistance that there will be, and the question is how it will be, how it will articulate itself. We shouldn't forget, and I think this is the reason why Trump knows that his time is really limited at the moment, is there will be elections sometime soon to the House of Representatives and the Senate, and it would be not uncommon that that there is a change again, and the majorities that are there now and then support his in favor of his politics will switch again in the other direction, and then he's a lame duck probably. And apart from the UCAs that he is issuing, on a daily basis, and the question is, how long can he do that? So I think there is, there is also, speaking about optimism, there is still a bit of hope there. I don't know, maybe our friends from...
Okay, we'll come back to you. So Julia and Daniel, would you like to comment on the churches? I think, Julia, you mentioned the churches, and maybe you could also specifically speak about the role of the evangelical community. Is it divided? Is it solidly in the Trump camp?
Yeah, so we at the Horizons Project take an approach to our kind of organizing ethos by this pillars of support concept. And, any form of government, if you think of it as a building, has, the roof is held up because of moral support, financial support, actual human resources by pillars, if you think of like the Parthenon. And faith is a pillar, business is a pillar, different professional associations like our American Bar Association is a pillar. And what we need to do is there's flows of support that comes from real constituencies up to this form of government. I'm happy to share some more about this. This is based on civil resistance literature. And the faith pillar is one of the more important ones in the United States right now. And there's been a fusion between very extremist evangelical communities. It's not just evangelicals, though. J.D. Vance is a Catholic. There's a stream of very extremist ideas within the Catholic Church as well in the United States. And so when you strip away one of the pillars of support, the structure crumbles. This is a little bit of how the theory goes. So the idea is like, how do you peel away support from a particular pillar? And one of the ways that this is happening is very much a cross-denominational strategy around making the case for why the Christian faith should not be supporting the current ethos and policies of this current administration. And honestly, we are exploring textual biblical arguments, but we're actually finding that that's one entry point into a conversation. But honestly, the brain and behavioral psychology of social norms of people, when you're deeply divided and polarized the way that we are, your social identity as a political conservative and an evangelical that believes in the Church of Trump at this point, then the right way is not through theological arguments. That this is why I'm saying it's almost like an approach, this engagement approach of finding trusted messengers with very much within the congregations. And what I want to say is I mentioned mutual aid networks. The reason this is so important, I think it's important for businesses as well, is if and when there are courageous leaders that stand up, and what we're finding is some evangelical pastors will from the pulpit say that this is wrong, and their congregants will turn on them. And then they get fired. And in the evangelical church, where there isn't a denomination to like hold them, they lose their livelihood. And so these mutual support networks is like, well, then how will we support courageous leaders? We will supplement your income, we'll take care of your family. And so really these like mutual aid networks within the Christian community, in order to support those that are willing to stand up and say something against their in-group, which is very hard with regards to kind of a social norm breaking.
Thanks for sharing that, Julia. So, Daniel, the other issue that Robert raised was the midterms. Are you confident that there might be a switch during the next midterms?
The Trump administration cannot capture the electoral machinery across the states because the federal government does not run it. So we do live in a federal country, and even if democratic backsliding does go very far, the states have a lot of independence and autonomy, especially in areas where their laws don't, they're not exactly the same laws. States have different competencies than the federal government. So I'm quite, cautiously optimistic. The Democratic Party obviously needs to get its act together here, but I think they will. Right? They have some good people here, and I think resistance is mounting. People are noticing. Oh, I sort of thought Trump would sort of, benefit me economically, and now I'm noticing that was actually maybe I marked the wrong box last November. So I'm quite optimistic that in the midterms we'll see a switch here. I just wanted to say one more thing about the business community here in the United States, because there is actually a lot going on, and I think that a lot of what's happening here is actually very impressive. At the state level, business leaders are engaging in very risky and in some, I wouldn't say dangerous action, but difficult action to protect democracy from authoritarian capture at the state level. For example, the Leadership Now project is an organization that I've become involved with. There are other ones, Business for America, and they're doing very interesting and important work and very difficult work, because you don't have the state supporting you like you do in Germany, where you have the whole state machinery trying to fight the AfD. That's not the case here in the US, right? So these are difficult battles that are being fought, and in many cases also won. So I think there's some very hopeful developments on that front.
Okay, thank you. So we're getting ready to take your questions. So please feel free to think about what you would like to ask. Before we do that, I wanted to come back to you. We're in Saxony, and the initiative was started and it's based in Saxony. Is it scalable? Can it work on a national and maybe also international level and reinforce itself with other initiatives in other states and other countries?
Yeah, you touched the right point. I mean, this is exactly what we are doing at the moment. We have started 8 years ago here in Saxony. It's been a very challenging start, I would say. We started out from 9 members. Now we are 8 years here, and I'm very pleased to inform you that the past year has been the most successful one in terms of raising new and inviting new members. We had a growth of 62% in volume of members, which is great, and I think it's also a response to the political situation that we've been facing here in Saxony, and still the feeling of most of the people that we meet and that join forces with us, that there is still a lot of work to be done here. So there's always the other side of the coin. It's always the political crisis, the elections in past September has definitely have additionally fueled, let's say, the pipeline and made us very optimistic in terms of development. We are far more we receive far more attention and retention on the local scale, on the local platform, but also from the federal government. I mean, 2 years ago, if politicians were coming to Saxony, we never received a call. Nobody, cared about us. Now they call us, they ask us to organize trips for them, visit companies, exchange, policies, and have discussions on, what could be changed, what could be optimized, and so on. We are continuously working on law processes, introducing our recommendations, receiving positive feedbacks, and very proud to say that we've been really able, to influence a lot of new new laws being implemented. So I think there is still enormous potential, but at the same time we see that also from the financial situation here is becoming more difficult. We see that we need to find different financing resources, facilities that we need to implement. We need to stabilize this, not knowing what will happen in the future, and become a little bit more independent of the governments and the administrations. Here, this helps. On the other side, a lot of responsibilities has been also switched on the federal level. This made us form with other partners, other institutions with very comparable mindset, a German-wide organization initiative called Wirtschaft in Weltoffenes Deutschland. This is now the next step that we are doing, and receiving very positive feedbacks and a lot of interest in joining forces. But we see also that J.D. Vance's appearance in MSC also made clear that this is not only a German issue. We have to also look at on the European and the European scale of it, and I think that this will be also something available. So we will remain, and the others also in their territory. We will be still care about Saxony. This is our main aspect. We are here on the ground and we can help directly, but we have to consider also being much more active and fight and make sure that the democratic decline will not happen or will not continue.
Okay, thank you. So who would like to ask a question? And if you're not comfortable in asking a question in English, I'm happy to translate. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Matthias Diermeier working at the German Economic Institute. So I did a bit of research also on positioning of companies regarding the far right. Daniel was involved in some of this too. And I think Julia mentioned it a lot of times that it is important to have trusted messengers. And the question is how or can companies or CEOs, business leaders be trusted messengers? Or, and I think research is very weak on this, is it rather, from a research perspective, a CEO positioning himself, herself against the far right or for democracy could be categorized sort of an outside elite queue. So it's basically a bit of, Daniel said we shouldn't do the erhobene Zeigefinger, but sometimes it sounds a bit like that. And how do you judge the balancing between, can you really be convincing, or what is the danger of a backlash by really standing up and speaking out? Thank you very much.
Robert, you as an entrepreneur, why don't you start answering that question?
Well, I think that when we look at the landscape, the entrepreneurial landscape in Germany, in the meantime, those days where we had only conservatives at helm, I think they are over. We have a very heterogenic, very wild landscape, and we have companies coming from different segments, and I think. So there is a lot of diversity, a lot of variety, and I wouldn't say that the right-wing approach or the right-wing orientation is neither the avant-garde nor the establishment there. And I think that in the end, it's then. Of course. Looking back in the history of Germany and thinking about the days of Weimar Republic and it was the business who made it possible in the end, and it was the common sense and the common interests of the National Socialist Party and the big money and the big financial resources there. Without this, we know the elections back then, and basically the NSDAP was already gone, and then they made them again strong and allowed this to happen, thinking that they can control this, but there were pure economic arguments and pure economic motivation running this. And of course, looking at today's world, we have to say, when you look at Europe at the moment, the whole defense sector, the whole thinking about now, how much we need to invest, 5% of our GDP and so on. And honestly speaking, we're talking about one country endangering us, and they force us into something that might bring back memories of older days. And the question is, where will this lead to? I don't want to draw the worst scenario here, but we still have to acknowledge this, that we are talking now about something that one country causes all the stress and all the irritation and all the total change in policies and will have a massive influence on the shape of our industry and economy in the future. And the question is then, what to do with all the arms and all the weaponization that is taking place there. So there are some dangers, there are some other things, but coming back to your question, I've been asked, why have I joined Wirtschaft in Weltoffene Sachsen? And I said, the causes, the goals, the vision and mission of this association is self-evident for me. This is not like, this is not something exotic, or this is not something spectacular, and it's not something that I would say is totally, incredible in any way. This is for me the absolutely, it's a very popular word nowadays, common sense. Basically, there is no choice to this. We've been fighting for this for very, very long. Now we have the situation, we have the democracy, we have a rule of law, we have a free economy, we can move around, and we have all the benefits that that people for ages and centuries didn't have. And so to preserve this, fight for this. What is? It's simple. I think there shouldn't be any question mark there. And I think that every businessman should consider the same, because he wants to sell. In Germany, the amount of export in the companies. This is what what all this is financed with, basically. So being open and being diverse, selling into the world means also that you have to respect the people that you're dealing with on a daily basis. You're selling to them. We've been selling to all of Europe. We've been selling to all the world, and this is the wealth, the prosperity in this country is mainly based on that. The percentage of exports is enormously high.
Since I don't see another hand at the moment, I'll pass the question to Daniel. Yeah, okay. The role of the trusted messenger in the business community.
Matthias, I would love to see the evidence. Please send it to me once or after. I think you're presenting something later today, which unfortunately I can't attend. I'd love to see this. I think you touched on a really crucial issue here. Democracy is about citizens, right? Obviously, we are living in capitalist democracy. Capitalism is brilliant and wonderful in many ways, not always, but but obviously I think the pillar that is always strong is that of citizens speaking in the name of citizens. Business people in the public sphere can perhaps have influence because of their social status, because they employ people, and therefore they sort of, their voice has a certain resonance or has a certain influence. But as you pointed out, the backlash danger is there. And believe it or not, I think it's already here in the US with Elon Musk. A lot of people don't like Elon. I think sales at Tesla are declining. People aren't happy. Even people who voted for Trump, Steve Bannon, has some very nasty things to say about Elon Musk. And I think we're going to see more of that coming. So how can it be effective? I think strengthening the voice of some NGOs, citizens or organizations, or taking off your hat as a business person and saying, I'm saying this as a citizen of, as a citizen of my country. This is, perhaps one can't completely dissociate these, but I think that can be a strategy that might have a lot of credibility, especially if the person has something to say. It's a tricky issue.
Who would like to ask another question? If there's no one at the moment, then Julia, I wanted to ask you how international networks can function in support of democracy and fighting extremism. Robert shared some insights of founding his network here and taking it to a national and possibly international scale. Does it really make a difference, or are these problems that we need to solve on a national basis?
Yeah, I'm thrilled that you're bringing this up because I actually feel really strongly about this, that we need international networks more than ever. And the reason is to share strategies and tactics very specifically. I think there's trends, there's analysis. We understand the commonalities with regards to kind of our politics and, you know, what's happening at the kind of social and cultural level. But what are we doing about it? Like, who's doing what? What's working? And we need to be in conversation specifically around how we're addressing this at both the community level, how we're partnering together. So I'm really trying to highlight when and how businesses and civil society have been coming together, and what the kind of, I say container, but like, what does the process look like? So we're, for example, convening regular salons. Salons is the name we give it, but they're virtual spaces off the record where activists and business leaders are coming together to kind of share intelligence, to know each other, to be able to pick up the phone in case something happens and we need to be in solidarity around certain actions. And I think that where I'm finding the most energy, actually, is with the international networks. I was just before this, I was on a call this morning at 7 a.m. because there were colleagues from India, from the Philippines, from Uganda, from Spain, and we're sharing different tactics like messaging, narrative strategies, engagement, and with who. When you're in the face of misinformation and you're trying to engage with people that are living in a completely different bubble than you are, what do you do about that? How are we engaging in this moment? So I guess my point is, it's not just international networks for the sake of international networks. It's really to delve into the strategies and tactics that are going to help us respond to what we're up against more effectively, and to also find inspiration and solidarity from each other. We're not alone in this struggle. And I think Americans right now, honestly, we need learning from other countries. I've been on several calls with colleagues in Poland, for example. We're learning a lot from Poland right now. I just want to say, we take inspiration, but we also have the cautionary tale that you can't vote your way out of this problem that we're facing right now. There is still a far-right party in Poland that has a lot of support. Why is that? The curiosity that you were asking about. And so that we can't end these interactions at once the election is over. And so I would say this to my German colleagues: you're about to face an election. Even if you're happy with the results, we can't take our foot off the gas pedal. We need to remain vigilant. We need to be in relationship with each other, even past any one election.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think at this point, there is no way that we're going to be happy with the results, just more or less despaired. But I see a question here.
Yeah, thank you. It's more of a comment than a question, because I think we're lacking something in our discussion. So there are a lot of topics in this room. I don't know where to look. Sorry, and I'm hesitant to make meaning for all of our countries. So please allow me to talk about Germany and the topic of diversity. So what I hear also in this discussion is the request for businesses to be political, to have a stance, to speak out loud. And I'm not an expert, but it doesn't sound very German to me. Like, if I think about our culture and history, it's not really a thing here. So I wonder if there are more approaches to that. And my suggestion would be to take a more holistic approach. And so I'll give you an example. I think we're really stuck when we talk about diversity in businesses, in this idea of diversity means hiring a migrant or hiring a person of color or women, and then you have all the checkbox, and you're fine, you're good. But I think there is a lot of opportunity and potential in the spaces we create for people and in interpersonal connections. And that's what I'm hearing, actually, when I listen to you, that could really make a change. And I think we're losing a lot of energy in trying to convince others in being political and speaking out loud. I think that everything is very important, but I think even more powerful is interpersonal connections that allow us to see how complex it is, that it's not only about me being a migrant it's not only about being a Democrat or a Republican. It is more. It's much more complex than that, and maybe this is something we have to learn again to see each other and to see the people behind the labels. Even and maybe the last thing I want to say is, at least in Germany, there's a lot of pressure on civil society. That civil society has the role to make a difference and to make a change in society. With little money, by the way. And I think there's an opportunity for businesses to do the same, because businesses offer spaces too that could be, I'm not saying become political or democratic, but you can become a space for people to be themselves. And that's all it needs, you know, we don't, yeah, maybe that's all. Yeah, that's the potential I wanted to add.
Okay, if anyone would like to add anything, if not, then I will turn it into a question to our American friends. We're currently witnessing a rollback of DEI standards in the US, so diversity, equality, inclusion. Are businesses resisting, or are most businesses or the larger businesses caving to that?
Could I say something about this? So I think I've worked on this. I've written about this. I have a paper after George Floyd was murdered. There's a paper I wrote about how business organizations had, were doing the right thing by trying to address racism, etc. And now Trump is putting very aggressive pressure on this. Some of it's just to avoid being in the crosshairs of Trump and not to be subject to character assassination, which is what Trump is really good at, right? So you don't want to get in his crosshairs, which, to be honest, is, I think, universally true. That is, most of us or all of us would do that. It's smart. There is some actual rollback happening. So it's not just for presentation's sake, internet presentation, but there's some real rollback happening. I think we're going to see a counter movement happening relatively soon because the stance of the government is so aggressive here that it goes far beyond the real problems that do exist with diversity programs, right? Checkboxing is, checking the box is often not, in the end, all that helpful, really, or it's not really bringing us all that much further. So there is definitely some resistance there, and I think we'll see more of it coming soon. And I agree with the comment from the audience that diversity is multidimensional. And if we acknowledge this, I think we'll take a lot of the challenges, some of which are legitimate, from the populist right away. It's true. Many of us, we have many different, I'm a white man, but I also have a disability. This is like, which one can, a lot of us we have complex identities. And once we discuss those, I think we start to recognize each other as human beings who deserve dignity and respect. And I believe that we can build on that. Because I think most people, even many people who voted for Trump, do still believe in those basic principles that are required to sustain a democratic society. So I'll stop.
Robert, since the comment was specifically targeted on Germany and its lack of diversity and inclusion, how would you see that from a German business perspective?
I would totally agree. It's not labels, it's not boxes, it's not, like you have a quota and then you have to fulfill that and then you do it. And I think it's, you really need to bring it to a certain point where it's a conviction and there is a certain demand. And we've been speaking about on earlier panels, I think about it, we see, or today also in the presentation of Mr. Frater, the diversity brings a lot of advantages. And I think this is what counts, bringing out the most out of people and including everybody, and that way enriching and optimizing the processes, becoming stronger. So I think that today, we speak about, historically, today's Germany is not the Germany 20 years ago, not the Germany 40 years ago, and certainly not Germany 100 years ago. The country has changed, and it's become a migrant country with a high number of population. We've seen today, you know, in the presentation, the amount of people living here in this country. I mean, you basically probably, you know, I don't know, almost everybody has some other root in him, and some other origin. All the different ethnies, cultural groups, whatever. I mean, it's a very diverse society. Maybe not in the, I don't know, in the boards of the DAX 30 companies or 40 companies. Not so much there. This has been pressured, and there's been, you know, some quota. Whether that has worked, I don't know. In the end, it's you know, it's a question of education. It's a question of a certain standard and certain expectation, and the way that you raise your children, you teach them, and this we have to concentrate. We really have to continue investing into education. I think this is the basis of everything. I've been extremely irritated, honestly speaking, that the duel between Mr. Scholz and Merz on television. I think not even once the issue of education has been touched. I mean, and this is the core of our problems and the challenges that we are currently facing. And they're discussing other things, what they have done greatly in this and that. And we talk all the time about migration, and there is no, not even a hint of you know, of one of the most important issues that we had, and Germany is a country, very little raw materials, very little you know, utilities and other commodities. We have to invest in our people, we have to invest in our minds, and this is, you know, what creates the basis for the prosperity in this country and for the democratic structure that we have.
Since we're nearing the end of our panel, I wanted to call on Marek. Marek, our countries share a long border, yet sometimes it feels like we're so far apart. Since we're talking about networks, can you share some ideas how we could tie our pro-democracy efforts closer together between Germany and Poland, and also maybe scale it on a European level?
I think what matters is organized opposition to violations of rule of law, to attacks on institutions of liberal democracy. And here I see the role of business associations, different types. In Poland, we have many of them. And I think they became more and more active in this field since Law and Just attacked the rule of law. At the beginning, many of them were quiet, but then they were more courageous and more active. And I think this is the space for, you know, international or at least European cooperation now between these business associations to learn from each other and to be the voice of business. Because, you know, in economy, we often speak about specialization. Not every CEO is able to speak about even his own company in the media or liberal democracy or policies, but business associations can do this role to be the voice of many businesses and also the shield in different times. So if someone wants to attack someone founding causes related to rule of law, he then has to attack the whole association, not individual business person. So I think we should support these organized forms of cooperation within the countries, but also international cooperation. And here Europe has an important role to play, and the EU cooperation, including associations that are present now in Brussels, like Business Europe or other groups that are there and should be more active in terms of institutional quality within the European Union.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much to the panelists, Daniel, Julia, Marek, and Robert here. Thank you all for staying with us and listening to our exchange and participating. And I think we're now off for a coffee break. And it's been a pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you and to following the work of your networks.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to you, our host today. We had, I think we have had a great discussion. Thank you very much for taking your time and joining us, and thank you very much to everybody here. Thanks. Bye-bye.
It was fun. Ja, es hat Spaß gemacht. Liebe Grüße.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, the fight continues. It's not over. We'll win in the end.